As a professional Gundog trainer and behaviourist, I have the pleasure of working with lots of different Gundog breeds. And in this video, I'm going to be ranking the top 10 most popular ones we have here in the UK. Some of the breeds are incredible, some of them not exactly for everyone. So here is the tier system. This isn't going to be about which breeds are objectively best. This is just going to be my personal opinion. So S tier is going to be my absolute favourite, so the dogs that I absolutely love. A tier is going to be dogs that I really rate. B tier is just going to be dogs that I like. C tier is going to be dogs that are fine, but nothing really special to me. D tier is going to be dogs that I'm not keen on. E tier is dogs that I really don't like. And then F tier, well, I just don't think there's really much point. So let's get into it. So first up, we have the Labrador Retriever, arguably the most popular Gundog breed. They're very forgiving, biddable, always eager to please, and one of the easiest dogs to train. Whenever I get a lab in, it's always a breeze. However, there is a couple of things that do set them back. A lot of people rant and rave about the Black Labrador for very good reason. They're very driven, motivated, intense dogs, but I often see a lot of people recommend them to first-time dog owners. Now, in my personal opinion, I don't think I would actually recommend a Black Labrador as a first-time Gundog for first-time Gundog owners, just for the simple factor of that they're quite intense, they're quite a lot to handle, and they are very driven and motivated dogs. I've been fortunate enough to work quite a lot, and for some reason the Black Labradors are just very, very motivated, and they're often the dogs that I find clients struggle the most with for things like settling and switching off, hyper arousal and reactivity, and just being so driven and motivated, which shouldn't realistically be a bad thing, but when you then take that and put it into a pet home, it can be quite difficult to handle. So the Labrador Retriever for me is going to be sitting at B tier. They're an amazing dog, I really, really like them, but there's just a couple of things in there that I think get brushed under the carpet, which I'm not really comfortable with. Now, very similar to the Labrador, we are going to go to its close relative, the Golden Retriever. Similar to the Lab overall, but very, very different character. I have seen some absolutely astonishingly bred retrievers that are fantastic on the field and also in pet homes as well. But unfortunately, I have worked with quite an amount that do have issues circulating around aggression, resource guarding, and a lot of hyper reactivity. Even though they're friendly and trainable, they can be pushed to the side a little bit because they are painted as the perfect family dog. Now, that's to no offense to anyone out there that has one. I'm sure your dog is absolutely exceptional in all ways, but I have worked quite a few that have kind of just really changed my opinion on them, if I'm being completely honest. Now, if the ones that I would only see on a day-to-day basis were the ones that I see that are bred with perfection and just outstanding lineage, I probably would actually consider getting myself one. But because there are so many that are poorly bred and not realistically that well looked after, I am going to position the Golden Retriever in B tier as well. Now, I'm going to try and not be biased with this next one, and it is the English Springer Spaniel. They're driven, they're versatile, they're a great all-rounder, and they absolutely love to hunt and work. And even though they're trainable and energetic, they do, like any other breed, have a couple of downsides. I often find that the English Springer Spaniel is the one that is so energetic that you cannot physically switch them off. They just go and go and go. And back when I was young and naive and I had Sid, I used to take him on super long walk. We're talking like we'd cover quite a lot of miles, quite a lot of distance and so on and so forth. We'd then get home and he'd go and pick up his tennis ball and want to then play with that as well because he just had so much energy. Now, this next point is a good thing but then also a bad thing, but I also find that they can be quite resilient and driven and pretty hardy, meaning you can pretty much chuck absolutely anything at them and they're just going to get on with it. And that's absolutely fantastic for a working role, but we're talking about pet dogs here. And with that makes them come across as quite stubborn and hard to train, especially if they've had the opportunity to go self-employed. If I'm being completely honest with you, even though I've owned Sid, I don't think I would get another English Springer Spaniel. I definitely would go with another Spaniel variant. So with that, and this has actually taken a lot of kind of time and effort to think about this one, I'm gonna position the English Springer Spaniel at A tier. I do believe with the right training and the right implementation and seeing a professional, if you have one of these dogs, you can do exceptional things with them. And that goes for all the breeds that I'm going to discuss on this rating list. Next up, obviously closely followed there from the English Springer Spaniel, we're going to go with the Cocker Spaniel. The heart of Gundog work. They're just an unmatched drive in a small package. I often refer to them as Belgian Malinois with floppy ears. Of course, like the Springer Spaniel, they're incredibly driven, motivated and trainable, but they also live inside your skin, which Springers less so. And for me, their downside has got to be the resource guarding. This has got to be something that I probably work with a lot of the time when it comes to my Cocker Spaniel owners, and it's just because it's a lot of genetics with very little outlet for those genetics, and often what tends to happen is it then showcases itself in resource guarding. And because they aren't as hardy as your English Springer Spaniels, they often get mollycoddled a little bit more. I tend to find they go two ways. They're either very driven, very intense, very motivated, or they just have absolute zero backbone, very just soft and plushy and just in their own shell most of the time. So for me, the Cocker Spaniel is also going to sit in B tier. Next up, we have the GSP. Intelligent, athletic, versatile, and they're often described as the Swiss Army knife of the Gundog world. And in my opinion, they're on the same level as actually some sport dogs. I've actually trained and then fostered on a working line German Shepherd from like very intense lineage, and some of the GSPs and stuff that I've worked with before in the past have definitely come on par with her intensity. For me, they are a very underestimated dog because a lot of people think they're athletic, they get them to go bike joring or doing canicross or something like that with them. What happens with that though is they often neglect the genes of the dog. It's absolutely fine for you to take your dog for running upon endless miles, but if you're not tapping into this, that is where you're going to see real problem, and all you're going to be doing is creating more of an athlete with a lot of mental need. Now this isn't where I'd obviously rank them based off owners, this is just my own personal opinion, and with that I'm going to place the GSP at A tier. Now this dog is my all-time favourite, and it is an S tier dog. I don't need to go into any description as to why, and that is the German Wire-haired Pointer. Very, very similar to the GSP, but there are a couple of differences that I have noticed through working many before in the past. They often have a very different character. There's a little bit more of a edginess, a little bit more of an intense side to them that you don't often get with your GSPs. GSPs I can often find are more of like your cuddle bunnies. They like to get all wrapped up in blankets and things like that. And even so, I've encountered a couple of wire hairs that are the same, but they're a lot more independent. They're a lot more off doing their own thing. And with that independence does come quite a lot of intensity. Something that I found out, and this is more from a personal perspective, is GWPs are definitely a lot quietly driven, as in they're not very loud and to the point, whereas your GSPs I often find can be a little bit whingy, a little bit louder when it comes to certain tasks. Now, for my personal opinion, there isn't really any downside to why this dog is up there in S tier, but I can 110% understand why people would struggle with a dog of this intensity. A lot of people struggle with things like recall, lead pulling, reactivity, even aggression in some cases, and it does come with that sense of them being a very driven and motivated dog. They have a lot to give out, and if we're not putting out for them, it's gonna have to go somewhere. So for me, GWP sits at S tier. Next up, we have the Vizsla. Now, this dog breed, I'm not gonna lie, I absolutely love. I think it is a fantastic dog. I would say that the Vizsla is very, very similar to your Wirehaired and your German pointers, but I do think they have a little bit more of an emotional character. They are very in their own shell a lot of the time, and I've not really encountered many that are outgoing and strong-willed and strong-minded, more so actually the opposite. They're quite sensitive but responsive and do bond very, very well, which unfortunately can shoot you in the foot with behaviours such as FOMO. These are absolutely fantastic for first-time owners, but like I just previously mentioned, you have to absolutely have to create a sense of independence. Give them that backbone through clear rules, boundaries, structure, and accountability, because if not, you're going to be stuck with a very sucky Vizsla that potentially is going to showcase some behaviors that you're not going to want to get on with. Although they are fantastic dogs, and I would actually genuinely consider owning one myself, I'm going to put them at C tier. However, the Wirehaired variant, I probably would sit at B tier for similar reasons as the GWP in just how they are overall. I've encountered quite a few that have kind of had the mentality and the characteristics of the GWP, but then the mannerisms and the movement patterns and the driving intensity of a Vizsla. Next up, we have the Weimaraner. I have actually worked with quite a few of these dogs, and the ones that I have worked with, honestly, if you're watching this, fantastic dogs, you know, whether it be post-program, I'd have thought the same thing, whether it had been pre-program, I'd have thought exactly the same thing as well. They are genuinely very, very cool dogs. However, there are some things that unfortunately set them really, really far down the ranking list. But first of all, I do need to cover the positives. I often find that the Weimaraner is very similar to your Vizslas, but they have a little bit more of an intense character. They're often the dog that I see a lot kind of be getting stuck in. They do often have a lot of issues regarding things like prey motivation and so on and so forth, meaning that recall can be a little bit of an issue. Prey motivation, you know, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but in a pet home, I can see why it would have its disadvantages. They are built to last. They will go for hours upon hours upon hours on end if you gave them the opportunity. I think I hold the record for one of my clients that I've worked with before in the past, where we had a dog that would not just settle. The longest duration of time they spent on a settle session was 6 hours. The dog would just not sit still. It would not switch off. It was just going and going and going for the entirety of that time. To be honest, I often find they're just not overly enthralled by human interaction. They're kind of just off doing their own thing in their own little bubble, and that's them happy. And in my personal opinion, and please, again, no one take offense to this, but you're probably going to take offense to it anyway, they're just not that overly appealing to look at. One of the most common behaviors that I have to work with my Weimaraner clients is FOMO, just the simple fear of missing out. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's conflicting considering what you just mentioned about how they're not really that people orientated and so on and so forth. That's not necessarily what FOMO actually means. FOMO is genuinely just the fear of missing out. So if they think something's going on and they're not a part of it, chances are they're going to kick off about it. It might actually be that they're not overly bothered about spending time with you. They just want to do the activity that they are thinking about, which is what's drawing them to want to react in that way. So with that, unfortunately, we have our first D tier dog, the flat-coated retriever. This is one that I would probably say is very, very underrated. They often get overtaken by golden retrievers or Labradors, but I'm actually here to tell you, with my personal opinion, I would put these dogs above these other dogs. They're incredibly capable, great to work with, and you can just overall have an amazing time with them. I don't think I've met one yet that I've looked at it and gone, yeah, I I just don't like this dog. I've actually worked with quite a few, and every single one of them I've been like, yeah, you are an absolute incredible dog. They're quite intense, but they're also very quiet and soft-natured, and I really like that about the dog. They're often the dog that I tend to have the greatest sort of play interactions with when I'm utilizing play, which you'll have seen in a lot of my other videos. And there's just something that's very majestic about them. So for me personally, I don't have anything bad to say about the flat coat. However, I'm going to base this off of just previous client experiences and just from what I've worked with before in the past. With everything that I've just discussed there and gone through, they can be quite driven, they can be quite motivated. They are also some of the biggest pullers that I've actually worked with as well. They can also get quite overwhelmed, and with that overwhelmed does come a lot of mouthing and biting. So from that, I am going to position the flat coat retriever at A tier. Last up, we have the Brittany. Now, from all you American clients that I've worked with, you're obviously going to be very, very familiar with these because they are predominantly the dog that I work with over in the States. The Brittany is compact, versatile, and has a fantastic nose. I often push a lot of my clients in the direction of like scent work or anything like that because there is really a lot of unmatched potential there that definitely gets underlooked. Now, here's a fun fact. You actually might think that the Brittany is a Spaniel, and it's actually not. It is a HPR breed. And like I said previously, with them being very driven and motivated and versatile, very similar to the Swiss Army dog as I spoke about earlier in the rating list, they do make exceptional dogs. So if you like the big intensity of a HPR breed, but you want that to be a little bit more compact, this would exactly be where the Brittany would sit. It's a really interesting one because I actually really didn't like these dogs, and for the simple factor of when I used to work back in the daycare, I got bitten by one, and from that day on I think it just really shook my perspective of them. I was always very wary of them and didn't used to really trust them, but as I started to work more of them, and as I, like I say, was fortunate enough to work with quite a lot of them over in the States, it's really changed my perspective of them, and I do actually really like them now, and I think they do make exceptional not only gun dogs but also pets. So with that, I'm going to position the Brittany at, I'm going to go with A tier. I think they are worthy of that position, and you know, I'm pretty happy with that judgment. So there you have it. That is my ranking of the 10 most popular gun dog breeds in the UK. And here's the great thing. This is just my opinion. You might think that I'm wrong about some of these, and that is absolutely fine. But this is how I see them through my experience of working with many gun dog breeds. The breeds I love, the breeds I'm not so keen on, and everything in between. If I haven't said your dog in this video, let me know and I'd be more than happy to do a part 2.